You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Welcome back, everyone. I get to start us off this week.
Yay.
Woohoo! Let's get philosophical, Kirk. You ready?
Oh, okay.
Is
we're
water...
getting all philosophical this week?
We're getting philosophical, just a little bit. Is water wet?
Define wet.
Great question. Is water wet? I don't have a definition of wet. Like how, here, separate question. How do you know when something is wet?
Okay, I know where you're going with this already, Rachel.
Of course you do.
Look, if I jump into water and I get soaking wet, there's that word right there, I can tell that I am wet. I feel wet. I experience wetness. I if I take a shower, I'm covered in water, I'm wet. If I jump off a boat, I'm covered in water, I'm wet. You can definitely tell you are wet. But I think the question you're getting at is, is there such a thing as being wet, right?
Sort of, yeah.
I mean,
for example, and I'll get into this a little bit more. There's a whole reason why I'm starting it off with this debate. But I think I
think I know the reason, yeah.
Am I able to, but when you're drinking something or are sweaty or feel damp or feel you did an entire topic on humidity. How do you know that you are experiencing the dampness, the wet in the air? How are you know that what you're experiencing is wet?
Well, what I can do for you, Rachel, is I can tell you a little bit about my experience of what it means to be wet. How's that sound?
That works. Sure.
I mean, if I put my hand into a bowl of water, I'm tempted to say, well, it feels wet. But I mean, what am I really feeling? I'm probably feeling the temperature of the water. I'm feeling the slipperiness or the viscosity of that liquid. I'm trying to think what else, other sensations. I mean, like how fast I can move my hand and whatnot would have to do with the viscosity. If I pull my hand out of that water, I can see the water dripping off. My hand might feel cold because there's more, heat leaving my body through maybe if some of that water starts to evaporate and whatnot. So yeah, if you grab a towel, right, and you put the towel on, I've had the experience of grabbing a towel and being like, oh, this towel is wet. Someone used this. But what I'm really feeling is that it feels cold.
And you're feeling the temperature
feels colder
difference
than it should. Yeah. And sometimes if you can grab something, I'm like, oh, this is wet. And then you look and you go, well, no, it's actually not. It's just really cold and it feels wet. Is that sort of what you're getting at?
That is kind of what I'm getting at. Like, for example, I for sure have sat in a really cold metal chair and jumped up thinking that it was a wet chair, and it wasn't. It was just very cold. Or, for example, if you drink warm water, body temperature water, or have it poured on you, I have a hard time being able to tell. If I jump into a lake and it's the same temperature as the air, I know that it's wet, but I have a hard time being able to tell. And there's a reason for that.
So, yeah, tell us. I mean, I kind of know the reason, but what, for our listeners who haven't picked up on it, what is that reason?
So generally humans, and in fact most animals, cannot tell if something is wet. They cannot touch something and tell that it is wet. For humans,
The
it's
way
a
I've kind of heard it
combination.
said is that we don't have a sense of wet. There's no like
Right.
sensory thing that detects
We don't have a
wetness in the
receptor
same way we
that
detect like
tells
sweet
us
and
that it's
salty
wet.
and those things. Yeah.
Exactly. For humans, it's a combination
But
of
we know
temperature.
when things are wet, Rachel.
Well,
We
yeah,
know when things are
because
wet.
of a combination of like temperature and touch that tells us if something is wet. We can't tell that something is wet. Our brains are tricking us into thinking things are wet or not all of the time. We have to learn.
Based on our past experience. And yeah.
Exactly. We have to learn whether or not something is wet. Which is wild to me.
Right on.
So, in fact,
it's very weird.
it's so weird. In fact, most animals, like I said, cannot tell if something is wet. They don't have what they're called hygroreceptors
Sure. Okay.
in their bodies that are able to tell if something is wet. The only
But
animals...
it sounds like some animals do.
Some animals do. The animals that do are generally insects and arachnids.
Really?
It's been shown
Interesting,
that
okay.
some stick insects, fruit flies, honeybees, some spiders are able to tell if something is wet. But that makes sense, right? Like they have to be able to tell if something is slick or if they are not even slick. They have to be able to tell if it's going to rain or be able to figure out if there's like raindrops or anything like that, if it's wet, because if they get wet too much or too wet, they could drown, right?
Well, I was just thinking about that. If you're a small insect, a raindrop hitting you or you coming into contact with that is like us having a swimming pool landing on us or something. Like,
exactly. Like you have
it's a
to be able
dangerous
to
situation.
tell. And
Oh
it's
man.
wild. Like generally speaking, this combination that we have as humans and other animals, the combination of temperature and touch, those receptors that we use, they have kind of taken over or taken the place of those hygroreceptors and rendered them like unnecessary. Even though we can't tell, they're not super necessary for us to be able to tell if something is wet. I don't have like
what we got going on is good enough usually, you know.
Right. It's all like a basic thing, and it is a more preferred system because we don't need specific receptors to tell us if something is wet. It was more valuable for us as humans to be able to tell the temperature of something or to be able to tell or like be able to touch and feel and have a variety of like touch receptors rather than a specific one that tells us, yes, the air is wet. You know?
Yeah, I mean, just the humid air feels different to us. We can detect that. It's just not a direct. It's more of an inference based on other things we
like
are sensing,
how it's like a little
is
harder to breathe, right? Because we're breathing in more water vapor than we would normally expect. So it's a pretty short topic today. I just really I came across the fact that humans cannot tell that something is wet. And I'm in a place currently that has been raining for forever. So
for forever.
For forever.
Good for you.
No, it's been raining on and off quite a bit. So we're all just damp. At least it's not snow.
Yeah, you've had dampness on the brain.
Yeah. So when this somehow was sent to me and I was like, hold on, I'm sorry. What do you mean we can't tell that something is wet? I have
Rachel,
questions.
I'm a little concerned about you because I know that it's been very damp. You're saying there's a lot of humidity. That is exactly the kind of environment where I would expect that fungus could grow. And I heard a story last week.
You did.
About fungus growing in someone's trachea. So
I'll
if you
keep
feel
an eye
your
out
throat
for that.
being a little like, little rough, just watch out for a tracheal fungus.
I'll take the
I hear
40-minute...
I hear it's a thing that happens.
It can be. I'll take the 40-minute drive that it takes to get to the first hospital.
That's such a comforting thought.
Y'all didn't know.
40 minutes, wow.
Yeah, 40 minutes at least.
I could probably walk to a hospital in 40 minutes.
You could.
Although if I needed a hospital that bad, I probably wouldn't be walking there. But, still, point stands. Point stands.
I live in the middle of nowhere.
You live in the middle of the boreal forest. We have established that. Yeah.
We have. All right. So my sources this week were the Journal of Neurophysiology, Why Wet Feels Wet, Neurophysiological Model of Human Cutaneous Wetness Sensitivity,
Woof.
the Evolution of Wetness Perceptions, a comparison of arachnid, insect, and human models by Merrick and Phil Nigiri. In the Journal
Can't believe
of...
someone wrote a paper called The Evolution of Wetness. That's...
Oh, these titles are excellent,
Good
by the
Lord.
way.
All right.
That was in the Journal of Thermobiology. I also have the Science Daily, Why Wet Feels Wet, the Understanding of Illusion of Wetness. And then my last source is from the National Library of Medicine, Human Wetness Perception, Psychophysical and Neurophysiological Bases by Phil Nigiri and Havaneth. Sorry if I butchered
You went on
any
quite
names.
a deep dive there.
I went on such a deep dive. My brain is filled, and it all boils down to we can tell the temperature and the touch. That's what it boils down to.
A lot of reading to boil that down to that. Wow.
Yeah, but it was good.
So when you did that deep dive, could you feel the moisture in the water when you dove in?
No.
The answer is no. No, you couldn't.
The answer is no. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, it'll be Kirk.
Hey everyone, we are back. Rachel,
Kirk.
you did a deep dive a little while back on yeast. Do you recall that?
I did a deep dive in the way that it was the briefest, barest, skimming of the surface of yeast. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't. So you did a shallow dive on yeast.
I water skied across
with
it.
So many facets to it. Yeah. Well, yeast is pretty amazing. It's an amazing life form that allows us to make everything from bread to medicine to beer.
Mm-hmm.
But something rose up to my attention recently.
Oh, man.
That I just had to share. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
That was a pretty bad
because it's strange, and that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So beer making takes a lot of yeast, and when you're done making the beer, you have a lot of dead, inactive yeast sitting around.
Right.
It can sometimes be added to animal feed for extra nutrients, but often apparently it's just dumped into a landfill, which
That's lame.
isn't so great. Researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT as it's known, I think they might have an interesting idea for what to do with that yeast. They think it could be used to take heavy metals out of drinking water.
What?
So this is really cool.
Hold on. Keep going. Sorry, I'm very excited. I'm so intrigued by this.
I know, right? The process is called biosorption.
Okay.
Or kind of absorption, but they call it biosorption. And this process has been around for decades. This idea of using something organic to absorb heavy metals, often lead, but it could also be cadmium or something else that's toxic like that, or even mercury. You're just using something natural to soak it up, like a sponge kind of, right?
Right.
That's not too hard to kind of picture. And this has been shown to be effective when there's high concentrations of a pollutant. But this team wanted to find out, could this remove very small trace amounts of lead from water? Now, there are different standards around the world, but here in the US, the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, has declared that there is no safe level of lead in water. It's not X number of parts per million. It's zero.
Yeah.
There is no safe level of lead.
I agree with
this.
That's
not necessarily true in other countries. Doesn't mean that it is safe in those countries. It just means we have a little bit higher standard here. And so lead pollution in water is actually a really big problem. Lead is very, very toxic, and it bioaccumulates in your body. So even a little bit over a long time can have quite a lot of problems. And sadly, a lot of water here in the US and even more globally, is polluted with lead. It's fairly common from a lot of different sources.
Well, didn't they used to like make pipes out of lead for water?
Oh, absolutely. The house that I lived in before my previous house now was built in 1926, and we had a lead water main coming into our basement. We eventually replaced it when we had our house, we had our sewer line redone because that also was almost 100 years old. And at the same time, we said, hey, you know what? It's going to cost a bunch of money, but let's replace that water line too, just because we didn't want anything to happen to that. Now, we did test our water often, and there was not getting lead from those pipes because there was like a layer of like gunk and deposits that build up on the inside of the pipe and actually seal the lead from the water surface. This is actually, since you brought it up,
awesome.
that was the problem of what happened in Flint, Michigan, is they had old water pipes. When they changed the source of the drinking water, this new water source ate away all of those decades of deposits on people's lead pipes, and suddenly the amount of lead in everyone's water skyrocketed from the lead pipes that had always been there, but they kind of screwed up by changing the water supply. Does that make sense?
It's still a problem, actually, over in Flint.
Yeah, no, it's a terrible problem, and not just there. So lead is really, really bad, especially for small children. It can cause all kinds of developmental problems and health problems. And there's even a theory out there that lead exposure causes serial killers. Have you heard about this?
You know, I actually have. I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts and things.
Okay.
And I have seen like, because the idea is a lot of serial killers seem to have wiring different, or their wiring in their brain, their pathways and everything are a little different. And it is generally attributed to something like a traumatic brain injury or something similar that affected in their environment.
Right.
And lead often creates, like you said, neurological problems. So
right. And on a bigger picture, it's actually called the lead crime hypothesis. We know that lead exposure can cause impulsiveness and aggression. There was one study that showed that lead exposure correlated with school suspensions and with juvenile detention. And interestingly, when lead gasoline was largely banned, there was a corresponding decrease in violent crime in the country. So it,
probably
to be
with
clear, lead
paint
does
too.
not make people, and lead paint too. Lead does not make people serial killers. People my age and older were exposed to plenty of lead growing up, and everyone isn't out there, murdering everybody.
Right.
But I think the idea is that it could statistically influence those edge cases where it kind of
pushes them
someone's
over
more
the
likely
edge.
to be violent or more likely to engage in criminal behavior. It makes all those sorts of crimes more possible. So just really fascinating. Some people are still trying to research. One place lead used to come from was gasoline. And you see like gas sold as unleaded. It's because there was lead in there. Even when I was born, there is incidentally still lead gasoline being sold in this country.
What?
But it's not really down at the corner gas station. It's used in general aviation. So not your big like jets and things, for like those engines that have a propeller on the front, basically small recreational aircraft like you see taking off from small local airfields. The gas they use is often still leaded gas. And as they buzz overhead, they're basically spewing lead particles all over our communities, which is, not great. And there is actually a real concern for people who live near small airports, right? So if you're in that flight path where every day they're flying right over your house, that's much more of a concern than if, occasionally one flies real high, in your neighborhood or something. And tests indeed have shown high lead levels in the blood of children who grow up near these small regional airports. So is still a concern. I will say overall airborne lead has fallen 99% since the year 1980 in the US, which is
awesome.
Impressive. But any lead is harmful, and it's important to go all the way toward eliminating it. The FAA actually, which is the body that regulates air travel in the US, has set a goal of eliminating lead in airline fuel or airplane fuel by 2030, which
Wow.
Seems like some like crazy wild future date to me.
Nope,
and then I
that's
realized,
like
oh wait, that's
6 years from now.
That's only 7 years away.
Oh,
Okay.
got it.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. All right. How is that only?
I don't know, Kirk.
Interesting.
I don't know.
So
when I was
anyways-
little, I thought I would make it to the year 3000. I don't know.
I don't think your odds are good of that, Rachel.
I was
but you
very
never know.
young when I thought that.
I was young enough that I thought the year 2000 was going to be some crazy wild future year, and then it really wasn't.
No.
So anyways, lead is bad, and we want to get rid of it. So let's get back to our topic here. Is beer yeast the solution? Maybe.
Maybe.
So this is just...
I'd forgotten you were talking
we
about
started
this.
there, didn't you?
I did.
This was just a demonstration study. But what these researchers demonstrated was that in a lab, a single gram of inactive dried yeast cells could remove up to 12 milligrams of lead in water when the starting concentration was below 1 part per million. So that is
wow,
very low levels of
Yeah.
lead. And the fact that this was effective at removing,
that's amazing.
12 milligrams of lead per gram of yeast is really impressive, because we knew that this sort of process could work on like have higher concentrations, but the fact that it's working for some of this low level stuff has the researchers kind of going, ooh, hold on now.
Fascinating.
This could actually be the kind of thing where we could treat all the water in a city, perhaps. It was quite effective. And being as how most of the researchers were at MIT, which is in Boston, they used that city as an example, and they calculated that to purify all of the drinking water in the city, they would need, get ready for it, Rachel,
I'm ready.
7,000 tons of dead yeast per year.
Oh,
Now, that's a lot.
That's a bit.
I did the math on this here. 1 U.S. ton is 2,000 pounds. So that's 14 million pounds of yeast.
Oh my God. Okay.
14 million. So you take all those 6 zeros, put a 14 in front of it. That is 14 billion pounds of yeast.
That is
a
lot of yeast.
This isn't practical. You're thinking, right? Well, Rachel.
What?
Think again. I think you are massively underestimating how much beer Americans drink.
Actually,
again,
you know what? We do live next to the great state of Wisconsin, so
you have some experience.
I have some experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the deal. Because they're in Boston, they phoned up the Boston Brewing Company to get their statistics. And you may not recognize that name, Boston Brewing Company. They're behind a lot of the brands you've probably heard of. They brew Samuel Adams.
Okay,
They brew Truly. They brew Dogfish Head, Angry Orchard, Twisted Tea. And then, so those are big national brands, but also a bunch of small, like local and off-brand beers and beverages you probably haven't heard of unless you're from Boston. This one beer company generates 20,000 tons of yeast waste per year.
Whoa.
That's 40 million pounds of yeast waste. So only needing 14 of those 40 million pounds, suddenly you're like, oh, hey, wait a minute.
I think we could do it.
That you could possibly do that.
Yeah.
So clearly the capacity exists to use yeast or dead yeast to filter our water of lead, but like an actual practical commercial method would still need to be devised. At this point, it's just sort of a cool idea.
But what a fun idea.
How would you actually do this on a large scale, not just like in a beaker or something, right? Or whatever they use. Like you'd need an actual process to like process all this water. Think how much water goes through a municipal water supply.
Oof.
It's a very large amount. But that is something
you had like another like
now.
tub or whatever, like when you're going through water processing plant, like have their own
I
like
don't know.
pool,
I don't know.
maybe, and have
Could
it
you
go
basically
flow
create
through?
filters full of yeast, so that's the water's flowing through. I'm not quite sure.
Maybe
That's
it's like
what
a
they're trying to
running
figure out.
filter of the yeast as the water goes through, or like, fascinating.
Then you got to get the beer taste out of your water, probably. Who knows?
Maybe. Well, it's all yeast
Anyways,
stuff,
I thought it was really cool.
That's fascinating.
To like a way to reuse an industrial waste product from beer to give us clean water and remove lead from our lives. That is just awesome and strange.
I love that.
And very, very cool. Unexpected use for yeast. So my sources this week were, of course, MIT, but also the EPA and the Life Science Network. That was just a cool story I thought everybody here needed to know.
That was so fun, Kirk. My God.
I know, you're probably worried it was going to be a story about infections when I mentioned yeast, but no.
I was a little bit.
Went away from infections. We talked about beer instead.
A little bit more fun.
Yeah, indeed.
Thanks, Kirk.
You've done it. You have you've joined us, and you've made it through an episode. Congratulations. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.